And yet there's an even more corrupt aspect of this that's been going on for a very long time. And you've been speaking about it for many years. And it's something that I've been kind of reticent myself to really jump into. But because it's coming from all angles right now, I mean, from every angle, I thought, no, we need to talk about it. And we need to talk about the fuel that is being given into these forces by way of incest and pedophilia. And this is the part of the conversation a lot of people are just not comfortable with. As you know, even from the people that follow your work, it's a very, very difficult one. Because something sacrosanct, which is a child's innocence, is being stolen by these very forces, and it's absolutely ubiquitous. In fact, I have to read something to you. This is from the Atlantic magazine. It basically said, it's an article from the Atlantic that dove right into it and the effects of just incest alone on society, and said that the United States would come to, and this would have to be Britain and most countries, would come to an absolute grinding halt if all the people that were participating in incest were, the whistle was blown, they were indicted, they had to go through the court system, they had to go into jail and so forth. The entire structure of society would absolutely collapse.
The entire structure of the establishment would.
It would, and society.
As I've shown in the books many, many times, these elite bloodlines that basically run the world as an expression of this archontic consciousness, this demonic consciousness. Incest is absolutely not, here and there. It's a fundamental foundation of it. So when you're looking at these people in power from these bloodlines, people like the Bush family, they've all, it's incest is the foundation of it. I've quoted people who've interacted with the Rothschilds and what have you, and know that this is the case. And the other thing is, of course, is why. When I was in America back in the 90s, and I came across the scale of mind control, first of all, but also the scale of pedophilia and child abuse, obviously there's a question. Why is it happening? Why are these elite bloodlines particularly obsessed with incest, obsessed with child abuse, and sex with children, and all that goes with it? And then as the years have passed and I've understood more and gleaned more information, it's clear that, well, again, it's a simple thing of frequency. One of the things the Gnostics talk about is that the archontic distortion feeds off human emotion. Now, this, if we bring it forward to the area of physics, makes absolutely perfect sense. Because if you have a radio and you tune it to radio 1, you get radio 1 because you're on its frequency. You're not getting radio 2, you're not getting radio 3. They're on different frequencies. So this archontic distortion operates because of its nature, its perceptual nature, within a certain band of frequency, a very low band of frequency. And if you are feeding energetically off others because you don't have your own energetic source of sustenance, because you are not connected in the same way to the wider consciousness we call awareness, you have to feed off energy produced within the frequency band that you operate on. And thus, this awareness feeds off fear, anxiety, depression, hatred, conflict, resentment, all these low vibrational emotions, which it has structured society to produce. Imagine what a world war produces. Or what is happening in Syria and Libya and Iraq produces in terms of that low vibrational frequency. Enormous amounts of it. and it feeds off it. And one of the things it's very clear, not just from this Gnostic source, but from other sources in other cultures around the world, is that one particular energy that this distortion wants more than any other is the prepubescent energy of children. We look at puberty and we see it as a hormonal change. But the base form of the body, as the base form of this whole entire reality, is not what we see. That is a decoded projection of it. It's a holographic decoded projection of it. The base form is waveform information. So, for instance, what does a computer do in a Wi-Fi situation? It takes information in waveform Wi-Fi form and it decodes it through its systems and it puts it on the screen in a totally different form to what its base form is, which is Wi-Fi information fields. That is mirroring the way that we decode reality. So when we are decoding that information in what I call the cosmic Wi-Fi field, we are decoding it onto our screen in the brain into the reality we think is outside of us and solid, when actually it's a holographic illusion of solid. So when children go through puberty, we perceive it within the projection, the holographic projection, as a hormonal change, but the hormonal change is merely a holographic expression of a vibrational frequency change that is going on at the waveform field, in the waveform field of the body. This force wants that energy before that change takes place. And this is why we've had this obsession with the abuse and the sacrifice of children going way back. The ancients used to sacrifice young virgins to the gods. What was young virgins code for? Children. So what we're looking at is something that's always been, but we're now seeing it in a different form, in a different era of human development, if you like. But it's always gone on. And so people have no problem accepting that the ancients sacrificed people and children to the gods. Well, who were the gods? This force were the gods in various expressions. And they have no problem in accepting that all that happened. What I'm saying is that although there came a point in human development where, in general, people rejected that, it didn't disappear. It went underground. So instead of it being done in the open as before, we're having a ritual, everybody here doing a ritual sacrifice to the gods. Now it happens in satanic rituals in the unseen. And so it's the same thing is going on. And what is happening, for instance, when a child is being sacrificed or an adult is being sacrificed, is there is a ritual which has been going on for centuries. And they just repeat it. They use the same rituals now that the Druids did and the Babylonians did. And they are building up, on one level, a absolute terror within the victim, understandably so. And at the point of sacrifice, as the terror reaches its climax in this build-up, particular adrenaline enters the body, and that is a nectar to the Satanists in our reality. That's when they drink the blood of the sacrifice. But what's released into the ether, where these entities and expressions of this distortion operate beyond the narrow band of frequency that we can see, is that the terror of the sacrifice is released, and they feed off that. And hence you have the reason for the term sacrifice to the gods. And And it's happening now. I came to America in the 1990s, about 1996. And the synchronicity of my life, which has been extraordinary since my own awakening in 1990, took me on a synchronistic journey across America through, quote, coincidences that put so many people and situations into my experience, where I saw the scale of it. And of course, if you go deep enough, the American government is based on all this. The American military is based on all this. It's being run by these psychopathic, satanic, demonic entities. I mean, we've got a man running the American military called Mad Dog. Massive. I mean, giving it away or what? Have a look why they call him Mad Dog as well, and you might not sleep well thinking he's in charge of the American military.
It's true, David. I think even you've made a case for what has happened among the elite very successfully, and I think maybe what is even more disturbing to me is that has been inculcated into society at large. And I bring it up because back at the time you were noticing these trends, you might say, or this kind of overarching energy in America, was about the time that I first came into awareness of the subject of incest, for example, in that I found out my mother had been raped by her uncle. I found out my cousins had been raped by their brother. I found out girlfriends had been molested by uncles and fathers. And so we know the role that the Catholic Church has played, and in fact recently came into connection with a former Polish priest who was raped on his birthday at the time of his ordination as a priest. And he is blowing the whistle on from the inside of how this is endemic to the priesthood in general, what the priesthood is about in the Catholic Church, and from all of the research he's done. But the reality is, let me give you one more example. Zeus, my husband Zeus, teaches a psychology class, and in among his students, he has noticed at large that between 30 and 40% of his students have experienced incest. This is massive. This is been inculcated, this darkness has been inculcated into society, where children are forced to sit at the dinner table with someone who has caused sexual harm to them. The cognitive dissonance in that alone is astounding, because it's reached down this deeply. This is why I really decided I wanted to talk to you about this, because we have to call it out in our families, our brothers, our fathers, our uncles, or a twisted mother or aunt from time to time as well. So how has that happened?
Well, we're talking about a distortion, a distorted consciousness. And as I keep saying, this distortion is constantly seeking to impose itself and infiltrate itself and assimilate itself with human consciousness. And of course, what you're describing is an expression of an extraordinary state of perceptual distortion. I mean, people like me, I grew up in a working class home in Leicester. And what was going on behind other doors, when I look back, I have no idea. But from my perspective, none of this ever happened to me, or I never came across it. But once you, and this can be, if you're not open-minded, this can be a block. That if it's not happened to you, then it can't be happening. This is right. a very, very strange perceptual connection that people make. Didn't happen to me, can't be happening. What? Have you ever swum the channel? Some people, the English Channel, some people have. Just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And when I got to America in about 1996 and started traveling, I was talking to nobody in terms of events. I was talking to people's front rooms and 8 people in a meeting near Chicago and all this stuff. But what I was doing was meeting an incredible number of people who were very, very knowledgeable in various areas about what was going on. And I came across this. And to me, it was extraordinary. It wasn't something you dismissed. you say, hold on a minute, one person's told you this. Well, that's interesting. 2 people tell you, 3 people tell you in different cities at different times, different situations, different backgrounds. And then it crosses a line where you go, hey, this is happening and this is massive. And when you get into the so-called upper echelons of society, the cesspit levels of society that actually run it, like I say, it's a foundation. I was in long correspondence for a while with a man in America who was living under another name now, but the name that was his, if you like, birth name was Philip Eugene de Rothschild. He claimed to be, with good evidence, the unofficial son of one of the Rothschilds that started the wine business, the Moucon Cadet, do they call it, in France. And he said he grew up at the center where the wine is produced. And he told me in great detail what he experienced. And one of the things he said was that incest is just part of life. And that you are brought up, because what's been explained to me by people who've studied this for a long time, this particular area, physiologically, and go into things that people don't like, but hey, we're looking for the truth here. That when you have anal sex with a child, where does it basically take place? In the area of the root chakra, the root vortex of the chakra system of the body, which interpenetrates the body with the wider reality of energy and awareness. And what I've been told, not just by one person either, is that it creates such a shock that goes through the spinal cord, it goes up into the brain, and it does something to the brain. This is what they're looking to do. They understand it a lot more, obviously, because it's passed on through the generations. So there are many reasons why it's done. And it's almost an initiation in the elite level, an initiation into this whole conspiracy in so many ways. Of course, what that does to you psychologically is almost incomprehensible. And it scrambles you, and we come back to the word again, distorts you in terms of what you would be like and what your perceptions would be and how you would feel and how you see the world, how you see yourself, by comparison with if it didn't happen.
Right.
And so what they're doing, these elite families, is they are preparing their own children to serve the conspiracy in the next generation by preparing them perceptually and locking them in to this low vibrational frequency, because this is what I've understood now over many, many years. These entities that are expressions of this distorted consciousness, some take a reptilian form, some take the form of the Greys, some take demonic forms. They take many different forms, but the consciousness is the foundation. While these pedophiles, and these elite bloodline pedophiles particularly, but pedophiles in general, are possessed by this distortion, by this archontic distortion. If you weren't, you couldn't be in such a empathy deleted state that you would do that to children. I mean, it's cause and effect here. And while the pedophile is sexually abusing the child, the possessing consciousness or the possessing entity is feeding off and drawing off the child's energy. It's energetic vampiring that we're looking at, with the paedophile as the conduit for this to happen, the possessed paedophile. And you then listen to shamans talking about their ancient cultures and how those that see beyond what we call the physical into the wider energetic field see the results in children going way back. This is not a new thing, like I keep saying.
No.
The energetic consequences in their field of that energy being drawn off by these entities. And when in the Matrix movies, the Morpheus character held up a battery and said, the machines have turned human beings into one of these, a battery, that was symbolically exactly what is going on. They're feeding off us. This is why they don't want us loving each other. They don't want us loving ourselves. They don't want us in harmony with each other. They don't want us in heart connection with each other. They don't want open hearts, because that takes you onto a higher vibrational state of energy, of frequency.
Out of their bandwidth, right?
They can't access that.
Right. Out of their bandwidth.
So, you know, when I see people in the alternative media, well, I think most of it's not alternative at all. It's just a different part of the postage stamp that realize there is a bit of a conspiracy going on. And they're talking about stockpiling weapons and fighting the enemy. Well, what does this archontic force say to that? Lunch. If you talk about the need to love each other and be in harmony with each other, oh, yeah, that's weak, that's weak, that's not manly. No, well, it might not be manly to you, mate, but it's the only way out of here. Because your version of being manly, we're going to fight and all this, the rest of it, that's how we got into this place. And what people have got caught in is this vortex going round and round and round the garden, meeting yourself back at where you started, round and round and round. This closed feedback system whereby you fight the enemy with hatred and with conflict and all these low vibrational emotions, and you feed the quote enemy and empower it to feed back that energy back at you. Breaking that cycle by breaking that emotional state is the way out of here. And that's what they're terrified of. That's why they don't want harmony. And whenever harmony starts to break out anywhere, they're in.
True.
Not through the American military and the British military on one level, breaking that harmony and causing conflict and the distortion to manifest. For instance, I've just watched today, funnily enough, a documentary. It's called Defamation, and it's by a Jewish guy who did this documentary. Basically, very, very good, very calm, and he just followed it, did a fly on the wall. And it is extraordinary how Jewish young people, particularly in Israel, are programmed from birth to believe that everyone else that isn't Jewish hates them. But it's not true. But when you've gone through that in all your formative years and all the information you're receiving is telling you that, then you believe it. And that distorts your perception of the rest of the world. And you will have the Muslim world, the extreme part of the Muslim world, being told that they have to do this because they're different and they're better than these people and all the rest of it. That's not the Muslim world in general, but it's just the extreme end of it. And they have to impose their will upon it. That's the program. which brings about disharmony and conflict. So if you look at the way children are brought up in different cultures, disharmony is programmed in from the earliest age. Instead of having the maturity to say, hey, we are all a point of attention within the same infinite state of awareness. That point of attention can be expansive into infinity, or it can be the size of a pea. That state or expansion or lack of expansion of awareness is down to your perceptual state, because your perceptual state dictates the area of this infinite awareness that you will focus upon. It can be an expanded focus, or it can be a very, very focused perception of reality where you see yourselves in very, very limited terms, basically founded on the 5 sense me, which is not who we are, it's just an experience. And therefore, when you get pulled into these what I call phantom self states, where you're self-identifying because of the tiny area of focus that you have of possibility, these different focus points of focus, which we call Muslims, Jewish people, white people, Chinese people, we call black, white, whatever, they can be played off against each other to divide and rule. Instead of saying, look, we are all one consciousness, having different experiences. We're all points of attention within this infinite awareness. And what you call yourself, your phantom self, I am a Muslim, I am a Jew, I am a Hindu, I am black, I am white, I am Asian. That's not who you are. That is what your point of attention is experiencing. Now, why can't we say, look, we're all having different experiences. Our point of attention within this short space of experience within this reality is seeing things slightly differently from a different angle. But why can't we respect each other's right to be different without feeling the need to impose our will, our point of focus on everyone else? Then we can be different because, of course, being different, expressing uniqueness, is to express the infinity of possibility without being in conflict. It's this manipulated perception that somehow what someone believes has to be imposed upon everyone else. So a country has to be Christianized. It has to be Islamized, Hinduized, or whatever. Why can't we just get on and say, hey, look, you see life from a different angle to me. That's fair enough. Let's have a beer. And if you don't drink, well, let's have a cup of tea. Let's do whatever, but let's just have a chat and respect each other's right to be different. But if that happened, of course, what you then have is harmony. What you then have is harmonic communication, literally harmonic communication in its effect on the energetic field. Distortion doesn't want that. It wants all these groups and all these perceptual, I would call them programs, played off against each other. That's why we have religious wars, race wars, and all the other conflicts. And in the end, it's all coming from this distortion that is manipulating events. But we have the power. The distortion has to pull itself, or pull us into it for it to have that power. We can choose not to be pulled into that distortion. And in doing so, we have power over our reality and not something else. And that's its worst nightmare.
Indeed. And people are starting to resonate with this message now in much more massive numbers than when you started with 3 people in a living room. And I mentioned earlier at the start of the conversation, you'll land in certain countries where mainstream media will even come out to greet you and talk about your events that are upcoming. So I would like to know from you, as the person who is probably certainly the most well-known on the planet in terms of this whole notion of conspiracy and alternate thinking, what you're seeing in the world at large, because you're traveling the world, you're talking to people all over the world. What are you seeing by way of awakening?
Oh, I'm seeing an incredible difference. I started a world speaking tour, which up to just before Christmas took the form of 10-hour all-day events, and now is taking the form of 4-hour evening events, which is aimed to bring more people in who are curious to look at what the information says, because they're more likely to come to a 4-hour evening event if they're only curious than they are to 10 hours. And the 10-hour event is on my website and can be seen anyway. But I started in Britain in 2016, the summer of 2016. I went to right across Australia and New Zealand, about 6 events there. I did 3 in the United States. I went all the way across Europe. I went to Sweden. I went all the way up through the Balkans, where the mainstream media were very, very keen. I mean, I was on mainstream programs in the Balkans that anyone else would be on. Prime time. I mean, you imagine anywhere else being last onto a breakfast program on the main channel and being given half an hour to talk about what you want, what you're saying. It's unbelievable. And what I'm seeing, and I can see this by the number of times I'm stopped in the street all over the world, that this information is getting out there. People are starting to think differently. I was told when I started out on this journey in 1990 that this was going to happen. It didn't seem like it was going to for a long time, but it is. I mean, when I was coming down from San Francisco to Los Angeles to fly out last time I was in America, I stopped overnight with my son Jamie at a place I love called Morro Bay. A little seaside fishing place, beautiful, love it. And I went into a restaurant. We only stayed one night. The waitress read my books. I went across and we went to a bar and there was a band playing. In the middle of the band playing, the band stopped and the lead singer said, "You're not who I think you are you? Who read my books?" And I went to the Isle of Man, which is a small island, last weekend. My 2 sons for a little break before this year takes off. And we were in this sports bar watching a football match. Not many people there. 2 people came up to me who were into my stuff. And this is happening everywhere. I stopped on the street in Australia by a guy in a business suit with a briefcase. And you see it when I even go around where I live. People who years ago used to laugh at me in the street, snigger behind their hand, are now coming up asking about what's going on in the world. It's really the numbers and the frequency are getting to the point where not only is the number of people that are looking at this increasing dramatically, but the kind of people you would never have thought would have ever turned their minds to this. And ironically, the more these, I think, deeply sick and disturbed people in Silicon Valley and those that control them are seeking to suppress this, the more people are saying, well, hold on a minute, so what are they saying then? And so it's almost counterproductive in a way. And when we have challenges, you know, as we do, as they try to shut us down, you just have to turn around and run straight at them. And if a door closes, well, find another door to open then. Don't sit there moaning, "Oh, look, I'm a victim. You know, I'm a martyr." I don't want to be a martyr. And I refuse to be a victim. We have to get on with it because we have the power. This is what this distortion wants. It wants us to believe we don't have the power, because then we sit on our hands and do nothing. Well, where's that going to take us? Nowhere. So you keep going, you keep going, you keep going. And the door's open. Because there is another force at work which operates in obviously, because of its very nature, it operates in a much higher frequency. And people say, when's the cavalry coming? And, well, if the cavalry came, symbolically, and manifested in the frequency band that most people are in, it wouldn't be the cavalry for long. It will be on its smartphone, right? Watching CNN. So we have to expand our awareness to connect with it, and then it can start to influence not just our insights, but influence our experience. Because in the end, whether it's a higher frequency or a low frequency, it's still an expression of this same one consciousness. And thus, it's an expression of us. And as I've said, I've just been putting this this evening talk together, and I'm going to put this image on the screen, and it's a guy looking in the mirror, and he's saying, oh, so it was down to me all along. Yes, it was. It is. It's all down to us. And once you externalize responsibility, once you externalize power, what are you going to do about it? Instead, what I'm going to do about it, you're externalizing your power, you're giving it away to the very force that is making the world in a state that you'd like to change. Because when you give your power away, and you do that by not taking responsibility, some other force says, oh, thanks for that, I'll have that, I'll have that, I'll have that, and then I'm going to roll it back against you. Responsibility is the first stage of sorting this out. And people have to realize that, because they still, in large numbers, even those that are awakening, they would still rather someone else did it for them. That's
no time for that.
How we got into this mess, not how we're going to get out.
I agree. The time for that is over. We have to stand up. We have to do our own 360 or vertical integration with that lovely higher energy that exists within us and exists even beyond us. But that's our choice, that we have to do that. And I was laughing when you were talking about all these people coming up. And if you don't mind my being just a wee bit personal before we sign off here, I remember that happening here in Penryn one day when you were a guest here at our house years ago, and you went out for a little walk in the country in this kind of redneck area. And you said, hey, mate, I'm kind of lost. I don't know how you get back. You're out in a bird preserve. And the man came up to you and said, oh my God, are you who I think you are? Out in the middle of nowhere, out in a field, are you David Icke?
Yeah, and you know, I use that as a barometer.
Yeah.
Not because, oh yes, I'm David Icke, but as a barometer. Because, 30 years ago, I couldn't walk down almost any street, certainly in Britain, without being laughed at and ridiculed. It was historic levels of ridicule. So that was my barometer then, but my barometer now is dramatically changed. And I went through a period where people didn't ridicule me so much, but they didn't take any interest either. But now we're into a stage where the barometer is saying, hey, something's happening here. There's a change taking place. And I think it's very, very important. One of the things that I would call much of it so-called alternative media has done is focus on the fact that there's a problem. Now that is important, because unless you realize there's a problem, unless you realize the world is not like you thought it was, then nothing's going to be done about the fact that it's not like you thought it was and there is a problem. But if you only stay in the 5 sense level of this, with names, dates, places, and what have you, which I do enormous amounts about, because we need to know that. But if you stay there only, then what is left to find answers than to stockpile weapons to fight the enemy, or to support another hoax called Donald Trump in the desperate belief that he's different to all the other stooges that went before? He ain't. That's all that's left. Because if you stay in the five sense level of the problem, you can only seek out and perceive five sense answers to the problem.
Yeah.
And A, the five sense problem is manifesting in the world of the five senses, but it ain't coming from there. And B, therefore, if you're going to solve the problem or remove the cause of it, which is a better way of doing it, then you have to do it at the level it's coming from, not at the level it's manifesting. It's like trying to change a movie by shouting at the screen. It ain't going to change. You've got to change where the movie is being projected from. And that's in the area of consciousness and awareness, a distortion or a harmony. That's the choice. We have a world of distortion because it's being manipulated by a consciousness that's distorted. We will have a world of harmony when the dominating frequency, the dominating energetic state is one of harmony. If we're in a room together, a group of people, and we're all getting on and respecting each other, then that energetic field in that room is harmonious, and people feel it. They feel joy, they feel happiness, they feel good about being in that energy and interacting with those people. You put the same people in another room, in another perceptual state, and they're all arguing and cussing with each other and condemning each other, then that is a massively distorted state, and people feel it. Oh, the atmosphere in this room, you could cut it with a knife. Why could you cut it with a knife? Because it's so heavy, because that's the frequency that's manifested by that state of being. And do we want to live in that room or that room, that world or that world? That's the choice, and we are responsible for which one it is.
Hear, hear. I know your dinner bell is ringing. I've been watching the time. I think your dinner's right about up now.
I know. I put my food in the oven.
Thanks for running it right up to the time the bell.
An hour and a half, which I thought it would run. So I'm not quite got the smell of burn yet, but it might not be far off.
I think so. I'm watching your timer right here. David, I want to thank you so much. I'm just so happy for you that you have hung in there all these years until the tide has finally started turning. Your own life is just going gloriously. They're making a movie about your life, I understand. You have your new book out, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told, so people can kind of look into the entire story of what we've been talking about and 1,000 times more. Any final statement before we sign off?
Yeah, also, that 10-hour all-day talk that I've been doing around the world, that's available at davidicke.com. As well in 4 sections. Well, I look at the world now, and there are many challenges because this manipulation is desperate to shut down the ability to communicate. There are groups in Britain who are trying to every time to stop me speaking in public. It's unbelievable that it's allowed, but it is. But I'm working. And every time they get a venue to cancel through absolute lies, which the venue, of course, never checks out, we find another one, and we carry on. And so there are challenges. But when I look back 30 years, when I couldn't walk down any street in Britain without being laughed at, when I look back, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years, when people just weren't really interested in any number. And then I look at now, then something is happening. And I was told, I met a lot of psychics in the early days when I was first awakening. I first had my, massive awakening in 1990, 91. And there was a common theme among them that they were saying, we're being told to tell you that there's a vibrational change coming, and it's going to wake humanity up from its coma. And all that's been hidden is going to be brought to the surface where it can be seen. Well, of course, in 1990, there was no evidence of that whatsoever. But I look now, and it's happening. And the first book I wrote, which came out in 1991, which I wrote in a daze because I didn't know what the hell was happening to me. I called it truth vibrations because that's the name I gave to this energetic vibration of awakening frequency. And when you look at it now, look at all that's been brought to the surface that was hidden before, that we know now, that we didn't know in 1990, we didn't know 5 years ago. And look at all the people that are awakening, because this, what I was told was that this frequency change, this truth vibration, would affect those that were more awake first, but eventually would awaken those that at that time were solid gold asleep. It's happening. It's happening. Not in the numbers we would like, but in numbers that are shocking compared with what it used to be like. And I've been doing this for 30 years, so I've been a bit of a barometer myself of this awakening and how it's changed. And never even close to what's happening now. And so there's a lot to be encouraged about. And as for not giving up, well, never. Because when you give up, I mean, what does that mean? You're accepting what is. I don't accept what is. I never will. Therefore, to the moment I leave this reality, I'll be doing what I do.
And on behalf of myself and everybody watching this and the millions of others who've been exposed to you, I truly thank you for being the warrior that you are and for never giving up. David, thank you so much.
Really nice to talk to you again after all this time, Regina.
I know. I hope to see you before too terribly long over in England. So go well.
I'm going to come to America next year and do a lot.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, definitely catch you then for sure. So meanwhile, have a lovely dinner. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your lifetime of work, David.
Thank you. I'm cooking it. It can't possibly be a lovely dinner, but I'll get by.
Okay.
See you. Bye.
Bye. And for more on David Icke, you can go to davidicke.com. Again, pick up a copy of his new book. And in the interim, I just want to thank you for joining us here on reginameredith.com. Until next time, thank you.